Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the movie The Batman. And I actually really enjoyed this movie. And I I always go in with that expectation with anything with a DC movie of I hope it's good, but I'm expecting insanity to ensue for the most part. Rather that be through the creative director and their kind of creative take on it, or the executives just having no damn idea what to do and just doing whatever the hell they want. This one works very well. It's like they understood that they needed to kind of have the director have enough kind of creative freedom to do what they needed to do. And we get a very cohesive take on the Batman in this film. I actually really enjoyed it and could very much compare it to like The Dark Knight. And that's not to say. Now, granted, I would probably say that I like The Dark Knight better because of some choices that I think could have been made to kind of switch it up a little bit better for this movie. But that's not to say that this movie's bad. Now, granted, it is like almost 3 hours long. And I was kind of like, ooh, that's going to be a big kind of commitment. Now, granted, I don't mind long movies, but that means we need to bring back intermissions so that way you can kind of like stretch, go to the bathroom. I mean, you'd have to have an iron fucking bladder for that kind of shit. However, when I was watching this movie, it went along at a pretty good pace. Now, that's not to say I couldn't say that there's some parts that could have been like condensed to make it kind of shorter, leaner, and kind of meaner, but it's not like there are kind of horrendous parts in here that I think should be completely cut. Even the stuff that I think that could be taken out is very good in and of itself. It's almost like that stuff could have been saved for like another movie and like focused on the different kind of characters, whereas this they do pretty much a basic kind of take on like the Long Halloween, except we've got the Riddler filling in and doing everything that's going on in this story. And it's a very kind of, not a very, but it's another thing that I kind of compare it to with The Dark Knight. Heath Ledger's version of the Joker was chaotic as all fuck. That's the kind of same kind of rationale that kind of works out with the Riddler. He he does have a specific kind of plan, but it's kind of more crazy serial killer-ish than I'm used to. Now, granted, this is also the beginning of Batman's career here. We learn in the beginning of the film that he's been operating for 2 years, and that kind of informs that he's still kind of new to this kind of game, and we're seeing the kind of repercussions and ramifications of what's going on. So the beginning of the movie, we kind of see that this one person is kind of looking in on this kind of family, and we see this one kid is pretty much dressed up as a ninja and getting ready to go trick-or-treating, and we see this one dude talking about like this election campaign, and it's for mayor of Gotham City, and he wants this other person out. And then we see this figure behind is like, oh shit, as they then go in smacking the shit out of this dude, and then it kind of goes out, and we see that Robert Pattinson's Batman starts kind of like going through it, and we start hearing his thought processes. And I gotta say, Robert Pattinson does a very good job in this film. Now, granted, my main exposures to Robert Pattinson's acting is the first Twilight and the Harry Potter movies for Goblet of Fire. Now, I have to preface this. I fell for like the marketing and thinking, oh, it's gonna be a vampire movie. I didn't know that Twilight was like a romantic kind of thing. And then I'm watching that movie and I'm like, why the fuck did they sparkle? Okay, maybe the vampires will fight in broad daylight. And then they push each other and I'm like, wow, I got fucking tricked here. This fucking sucks. And then I read the book, and just to be able to be like, yeah, I read it and I didn't like it, and it's like, no. So yes, that's a little bit more information that really doesn't really fit into here, but that's my extent of Robert Pattinson's acting that I have seen. I haven't seen any of his kind of other stuff. I liked him in the Harry Potter series as Cedric Diggory, and I really liked him here as Bruce Wayne. And Batman, they really showcase the inner turmoil and everything, and he really kind of gets Batman. Like, the thing is, this movie is very dark. Because of like the subject matter and also how it's filmed and everything. However, it fits within there because Batman is still, granted, tortured and everything, but he's still trying to do better and do things to kind of help people. It stays true to that without him going completely and utterly nutso, kind of in the Frank Miller kind of territory, almost kind of like Punisher level territory. He's still trying to deal with everything and do his own kind of thing, seeing his kind of thought process as he's going around, because the movie starts at around October 31st, which of course brings you the more kind of long Halloween kind of comparisons. And he's like, yeah, everybody's like doing their own kind of stuff, but they see that since he's been operating, that when the light goes on, that inspires fear in certain criminals, as we see them doing elements, graffitiing a bank, one dude robbing a convenience store, and then we see these groups kind of inspired by the Joker as they're pretty much trying to do their own kind of like thing of like just randomly attacking people. And that's where we're introduced to Robert Pattinson as Batman. And I really liked how they kind of did Batman in this, because he's kind of shown as this kind of supernatural kind of force almost. Not that he's like a god level or whatnot, but when you're doing bad things and then he just like you hear him first at thunk thunk, and then you see him in the outfit and you understand that it's a combat outfit. And I really fucking love the take for the costume. It just works very well, and you see that this is an armored kind of Batman. You could almost go pretty similarly to like Ben Affleck's Batman, also kind of similarly to Christian Bale's Batman, but it's kind of got his own kind of flair to it, and it's kind of newer as then you then go throughout the movie and you see like the damage and everything. I always like to kind of see that for like character and plot progression, but you see him and he just sounds like a like he's got a lot of weight and everything, and you just see him kind of like take these guys out. And the thing is, I like his Batman voice. Granted, it's more of a kind of like rougher whisper, not the kind of growling as Christian Bale or the kind of way that like Ben Affleck was doing his Batman. Not that I had really positives or negatives for him, but I do like Robert Pattinson's doing that as he takes out these Joker guys. And we see he also has similar kind of armaments of kind of Black Widow as a kind of like built-in taser thing into his kind of gauntlet. But he's able to kind of like hit that out, and this one dude who was like a half into the Joker gang just flees because this one dude shot at him. He's like, no, well, not at the Joker dude, but at Batman. And even the dude he helped is like, just get away from me. And as he then runs away, I'm like, yeah, dude dressed as a bat does tend to freak people out. Well, we see that Jim Gordon then brings him in, as we see that the mayor who was running for re-election is dead. And we see that it's like no more lies and everything like that, and that there's a thing addressed to the Batman. And it's this card, like, okay, what do you call a liar who's dead? Like, what does a liar do that's dead? And it's like, he still lies. And starts going through ciphers and everything like that. That's another kind of really strong point for this film, is that it does more stuff with the detective work and actually focuses on that. And Batman, of course, does get some help of what's going on, because we see that he's got technology with like things that he can record with his eyes, contact lens wise, which was actually pretty cool. Now, granted, Alfred does kind of help him with certain code breaking and everything like that, but we see him actually trying to like go through and do certain things. Not that other Batman movies haven't done that before, but it's good to have that kind of focused on and done in this kind of film. So he's trying to figure out what's going on with that, and he had also seen the one kid, he just lost his father, and you can see him have that kind of feeling for him as they're then trying to figure out kind of where to go next. And the cipher gets down to drive. It's like, okay, he's got all these cards, so him and Jim go and try and see what's going on with that. And the thing is, we also see that Batman is not universally accepted. Jim's the only one that kind of trusts him, and Jim's other partner is like, no, get him the fuck out of here. And that's important because that then brings on to the next kind of victim after we get through this part where they find a thumb drive in one of the dude's cars with his severed thumb that they used to de-encrypt it to see all this kind of stuff that is then sent out, all these pictures of him with this woman at the Iceberg Lounge, and that's all sent off through Jim's emails. Like, this dude's pretty smart. And that's the kind of thing. There are funny bits in this film, and they're very well executed because they work tonally in what's going on. Like the thumb drive. It's so just disgusting, but it fits with it. It's like, this dude's fucked up. But then it's like, ooh. Using a thumb to encrypt it and then leaving it there. It's like, god damn. So we see that Batman then goes to the Iceberg Lounge to try and figure out what's going on, and he's also seen other stuff within the pictures as well. Trying to find the lady in the picture, trying to see what's kind of going on, where the next victim's going to be. We also see that Alfred is like trying to get through to him because he's still kind of in the kind of beginning of his thing and the beginning of his obsession, and he'd have to deal with like certain accountants and everything like that. And he's like, yeah, just we have to deal with this shit. And Andy Serkis does a. I don't have a problem with him as Alfred. It's just there's so much going on and so much in this movie that he's not really given much except very specific plot things to be done. So I can't really say if he's really good or really bad because I don't feel that there was really enough for him in here to get that kind of feeling, because it more focuses on Batman than on his kind of support structure. More like Batman, Selina, Penguin, Riddler kind of stuff going on with that, because it gets big out. We see that Jim's partner is the second victim, and that he has to find and bring the rat into the light and everything, and that's even brought on more as he's trying to like figure out what's going on, because there's another there's another club within the club, and he gets brought in with, he tries to find the girl, follows this one woman that he had seen in the club, Selina Kyle, and they're friends, and he sees her in the apartment, and she's trying to go and break into the dead mayor's house to get what's going on? Why is she in there? And they have a little fight and everything, and we find out she's trying to get her passport and everything so that she can leave because she knows information that could get her killed. Selina goes back to her apartment. Her friend's missing, so they kind of work on a deal to try and figure out what's kind of going on, sending her into the Iceberg Lounge to then kind of scout out what's going on, get any more kind of information. And we see that there's a DA down there, and that there's this kind of drug business that Penguin and everything else is kind of involved with. And Batman did talk with Penguin before, and he actually was kind of helping him a little bit. He's like, I don't know what's going on. You do you, man. And it's kind of interesting. You're like, okay. And I'm alright with this take on Penguin. It's just, he's more of a bit player, as him and Selina are more in the bit players of what's going on with the Riddler. And that kind of informs my decision, because I believe that it would be kind of better if it just focused on Batman going with Riddler, and that these characters either got scaled back even more or weren't even in here to kind of begin with. If anything, they should have been more kind of teasers, because they're kind of halfway, in my opinion. Like, there's enough there to be like, okay, these are good characters, I want to know more about them, but there's also the plot of everything going on. They do tie in, but I think that their contributions to the overall story and what's kind of going on could have been better done, or scaled back enough to just have us focusing on Batman doing his best against the Riddler. Because that's pretty much it. We get Batman pretty much interrogating Penguin to figure out what's going on, and then later on we get him in the Bat chase with the Batmobile, which is kind of more grounded. Well, not more grounded. It's just this really souped up car, but it's really kind of nice. So I'm like, all right, cool. And then that's pretty much the deal with the Penguin, as he then kind of just factors in later on with things kind of falling out how they do. Selene is a little bit more active within the plot because she actually makes decisions, but that's about it. Selena does look around. She does get some more information on her friend and tries to go after that, but of course, Batman wants to get more information about what's going on with the DA, and she drops out. Riddler captures the DA and sets it off to another kind of thing. It's like, okay, let's see how this goes. Well, Bruce decides to make an appearance at the funeral and kind of see what's kind of going on. We see Carmine Falcone, and he's doing his own kind of thing. He's like, yeah, and we get a little backstory that Bruce's father actually patched him up because, well, he's thinking, how would that work out? Like, hey, I kind of owed your father for that. And it's like, yeah, he just did it because it was the Hippocratic Oath. And he kind of lets him go. We see everybody kind of, like, their various kind of feelings about the death of the mayor. A lot of those who are less fortunate being like, yeah, screw this shit. And then the mayoral candidate's like, hey, Mr. Wayne, you haven't really been doing much like your father with the philanthropy, and I kind of want you to help me help the city as well. As they're then kind of, she like goes off to send her condolences to the family. We see that Jim and one of the other officers are like, hey, Mr. Wayne. And then we hear this car, and we see that the kid kind of is looking out towards what's going on. We see, of course, that there's a figure that's probably the Riddler kind of looking on what's going on because everybody kind of goes off to see what's coming up. And Bruce dives and protects the kid as this card comes in, and we see it's done by the DA, and then he's got a thing on himself that says the Batman as there's a phone ringing. Well, they get everybody out, and he's sitting there for a little bit, but then Bruce comes in as Batman, and we start seeing what's kind of going on as he answers the phone, and the thing is the DA is given the chance to save his life if he answers 3 riddles. However, it gets to the last riddle, and he's supposed to name the rat, but he's like, if I can't. Thing is, you kill me, I'm dead. If I name these people, me and my family, I'm fucked. So he decides to die. Now, here's one of my kind of criticisms. Batman was right on top of him, and that explosion was like fucking huge of what was going on, and he just pretty much gets knocked out. It's just, if it had been like centralized or whatnot, I'm granted they were probably trying to keep it to the effect that he didn't get turned into chunks because of the bomb was around his neck or having his head pop off, because that probably would have been other kind of like effects that they would have needed. Probably would have pushed it to a harder R rating for that. It's just, I'm like, okay. So then Batman wakes up in the police precinct, and there's like cops all around him and everything, and the thing is, the chief does give Jim a little bit of time with him. He's like, all right, listen, here's the key. Punch me out and get out. And the thing is, he recognizes one of the bouncers from the Iceberg Lounge. He's like, yeah, you got a lot of dirty cops everywhere. Punches him, runs out. We see him kind of fly off. And the thing is, we find that in this version, the cape is more decorative, but he's able to turn it into kind of like a wingsuit as he then flies off and pretty much gets... He hits something, and he gets hurt, but he then just kind of walks it off. This Batman, I really like the physicality. Now, granted, other movies have done physicality with Batman, has done that well as well. This one, I'm just glad they're able to kind of hit that because Bruce is a man, and it's very kind of Die Hard-ish. You know what I mean? An action character, you really kind of want that balance of someone that you think can, like, really be able to go into a fight, but is still able to get hurt. You want to do that balance, that kind of, and that's where John McClane kind of did that line very well, where it's like, yeah, he beat the shit out of some terrorists, but he got fucked up doing it and everything. Whereas he just kind of walks off, just like, all right, cool, we got to figure out kind of what's going on here. So, we'll understand that there is a rat, and they have to kind of like bring it into the light. So they try and interrogate the Penguin on it. It's like, that's really shitty Spanish there. And then pretty much trying to uses it to find this like URL kind of thing. And he kind of like talks with the Riddler, and the Riddler thinks he's kind of like on the right track, but he doesn't have everything. It's like, whatever. And there's a funny little thing where they kind of like bound up Penguin and he kind of shuffle hops kind of like a penguin. There's really little Easter eggs like that where this is kind of a more grounded take, but they do kind of weird, kind of crazy things like that. So they're trying to figure out. Wait a minute. That's a little bit later, I think. But that's an important bit. See, the thing is, we see that they need to get the rat, and they think that it's first Penguin or whatnot. And Jim and Batman try and go after it. They find this kind of drug thing going down. Selina gets in there trying to get money and finds that her friend is dead. And then that does this whole kind of chase with the Batmobile and everything, as he's then able to get Penguin to kind of suss out what's kind of going on with the rat and try and figure out what's happening with this. And we see that the Riddler definitely has a following and everything because he's been live streaming and everybody's kind of like following all this kind of stuff. It's like, okay, it shows this interesting kind of concept of like what symbols and what people can kind of do, and it very much brought upon kind of similarities to me from like the Halo franchise. I know that's going to be a weird kind of connection, but in the Halo franchise we have this kind of organism called the Flood. And the thing is, they usually are able to take over organic matter. However, they're also able to take over inorganic matter, like AI, using something along the lines of logic plague. I.e., they're able to use weird, strange, circuitous kind of logic to kind of warp someone's perception into doing other kind of strange kind of things. And this kind of follows along the same kind of thing as Riddler is doing this, and Batman is learning that he's having this effect that isn't the kind of effect that he wants. That's really hammered home at the end of the movie. Let's see. That. Definitely getting into that, and they're trying to figure out, okay, renewal, all these things. We also learned that he's trying to go after Bruce because it's the sins of the father, because he goes to the orphanage to kind of see what's kind of going on there, because that's where the next kind of clues lead, and we see these people dealing with the drug and everything, and that brought up with Bruce Wayne and sins of the father, and that something was going to be sent to Bruce, and Alfred opens it up and almost gets blown up, and we see him pretty much resting in the hospital as Bruce tried to get there in time but failed. And he's trying to figure out all this kind of stuff, and we see that he is able to learn that his father was going to run for mayor, and that there's this journalist that got dirt on Martha and everything like that, was going to air it and everything, and we're like, okay, then what happened? And evidently we learned, because of his links to Carmine Falcone, that Bruce goes in there to kind of suss it out, and evidently his father decided to utilize Carmine Falcone at first to just scare the person, but of course he wasn't getting the fear of God, and Carmine killed the dude, and Bruce is like really shaken by this, talking with Alfred as he wakes up, and he's like, why didn't you tell me my father would do that? That's a big kind of thing to learn. And Alfred's like, it's not that simple. He didn't want... It wasn't because of his political aspirations. He didn't want Bruce and Martha to be hurt by this information getting out there and just being used as a cudgel, which makes sense. However, he didn't want Carmine to kill the journalist and then was going to turn him into the police, because Carmine spun it that because of their connection, that it was the previous kind of drug dude that was Salvatore. Salvatore? Carmine Falcone. Maroni? No. The previous kind of drug dude that was kind of like going on. And the thing is, we learned that that operation was taken over. And we're trying to figure out throughout all this movie of why that's going on. But it connects to everything going on. And we see that Bruce kind of learns that kind of way and tries to kind of figure out more of what's kind of going on. So like, okay, all this kind of, he's able to like parse it out, and we learn that the rat was pretty much Carmine Falcone, and that he was able to pretty much get all these people involved. They're like, yeah, you can do a drug bust, but you got all these people working for you, and he's pretty much the unofficial mayor. And we learn that one of the cops was involved because Seleno decided to go after him. And the thing is, her and Bruce kind of made up, like, listen, I'm going to go after him. I'm going to do it my way. She's pretty much going to go shoot him. But we learned that her father is Carmine, and she's going to go after him. She wants him punished. And the thing is, she doesn't trust the system to punish him. So Bruce kind of goes after her to kind of stop her from doing that, because that's a big kind of thing. And that's kind of where there's a lot of kind of like parts where there's like climaxes in this. This is pretty much Catwoman's kind of climax as she goes after Carmine, almost kills him, but Bruce is able to talk through her and get her down from doing that, and they decide to take him out instead. During this sequence, there is pretty much a similar kind of scene like Rogue One, Darth Vader wise, just the scene where Batman is going through the hall, where with the guns going off, it's just beautifully shot and just really shows how effective his suit is at protecting him from bullets, and just how he can just take down people. I do like his style of combat in this. It is different than Christian Bale's and Ben Affleck's and all the other Batmans that came before. So I do like when you see someone put their stamp on it like that. It's a good kind of thing, and a very key thing in action scenes, because it helps to cement the character status of who that character is by how they fight. Alright. So they're pretty much getting Carmine out, and the thing was to bring the rat to the light, and Penguin's like, screw you, man, is about to hit him, but while everyone's focused on that, we see that somebody shoots him from another window, and they kind of run up to there, and we find the Riddler's hideout, and that he pretty much had a way to pretty much put himself in the police's crosshairs at this point, and then goes into Arkham, because we see him at the counter. That's one of the ones where we see the whole Riddler kind of thing. We learn he's Edward Ashton, and he's pretty much in there. They're trying to look into what's going on. They see that there's this locked video and everything, and he's asking for the Batman. And we see him kind of laying out what's going on. At first, we're led to believe that he understands that Bruce Wayne is the Batman, because he's talking about his time in the orphanage and how it's unfair that Bruce got all of this sympathy, but him and the rest of the orphans didn't. And that he was a forensic accountant, and he was able to figure out what was going on with Project Renewal, and how this pretty much group of people have been utilizing it and doing their own kind of thing to do this drug trade and pretty much make the city a shithole. And he said, oh, I must have given you more credit than you deserved for how smart you were, because we were supposed to. He wanted to be like the Batman. He wanted him to be partners and to watch what was going to come next. And he's like, what are you going to do? And he's like, no. And he's very upset. You can definitely see that he has this kind of intelligence inferiority kind of complex going on. It's like, yes, I'm smarter than anybody else. Like, oh, I must have. And the thing is, he wants to find that kind of equal. However, they can't be too equal, you know what I mean? They've always got to have that thing where they're like smarter. And so Batman goes back, and we see him rip up the carpet, because that was the key tool that we'd seen in the beginning, and we see that this is the real change, and that he had given a last video message to his followers to thank them, and that the real change is going to be coming, and that he had set off bombs around the seawalls of Gotham City to then flood the city and to force them into a place all at once, so that way the rest of his followers, who had, we learn after Batman takes out one of them when they say that they're vengeance, which is what Batman's been saying. He's like, wow, because he has inspired these people, however, to act in horrendous ways. Now, granted, I would not completely put this on Batman. You know what I mean? He's doing one thing and trying to help people. Now, granted, he's going around at night and beating the shit out of people and trying to solve crimes and murders. So that would probably lead certain people to think, I have been wronged. I can use violence to do my own things as well. That's on them to make that choice. But the thing is, how do you kind of balance that? You know what I mean? It was a very interesting kind of thing, and I like that it was kind of brought up. So he did it to pretty much have the mayor there at that one spot and have everybody else kind of there, and we see these rest of these people inspired by the Riddler with these other kind of the similar kind of masks on that he has had, and they're loaded to bear, as nuts as they are, to take out whoever they deem, pretty much. And of course Batman's able to get in there, and we get a great kind of action scene as he's taking on the rest of them. We see him utilizing his suit and his other kind of gadgets. One of them, this kind of, granted, even though I like the movie, it was kind of like a kind of MacGuffin to kind of like get him out of this one kind of stupor. I don't mind that he had this kind of like adrenaline thing to kind of like get him back up, but it was the only time we'd ever seen it or alluded to it, so it was kind of like, I just needed a little bit of maybe planting or foreshadowing for something like that, because we get it for other kind of things as well. I don't think it's completely horrible, but it could have been worked in a little bit better. We see him utilizing like the batarang from his chest, which was an interesting kind of thing, to cut this kind of electric thing that was going to electrocute pretty much the mayor and the kid that we'd seen from the previous mayor, as they're kind of like under this stage thing as the floodwaters are coming in. But we see that Batman then kind of works throughout, helps them, and the first one to accept his help is the kid. And it's kind of cool to see that they have that connection, getting them out. We'd seen Selina help Batman because he was pretty much in a sticky situation that he had to use the kind of like adrenaline shot, and he's like bashing into this one dude, and he of course brings up the whole vengeance kind of line to get us into the connection between Batman and the Riddler. Let's see. So he's pretty much helping throughout and kind of monologuing what's kind of happening, as he understands that he needs to be better, that there needs to be hope, and that we should try and move past our traumas. And I'm like, that's good. I like that kind of messaging for what's going on. And the mayor trying to affect change and to create better institutions within Gotham City. I'm like, yeah, alright, cool. And these themes don't come out of nowhere. You see them kind of seeded throughout it. We see the corruption and see all these horrible kind of things because of these consequences. And to see Batman like working out further and seeing people actually like affected by his help. Like one's like, I don't want to let you kind of go, and he's like, it's okay. As they're like on the roof of this kind of like giant sports complex that was the kind of like last resort, because it worked out to be on election night, and trying to figure out all those people to kind of like get from the floodwaters for evacuation. That was nuts. So we see that Selina's pretty much like, yeah, I got the money. My father's dead. I don't think this place is going to change, so I'm going to go to Bloodhaven, which I like that name drop. I'm like, alright, cool. You're doing... This movie did a very effective job of being a DC movie that doesn't go completely crazy and like shouting certain things at you. It's like, oh, look, here's an Easter egg, here's an Easter egg. It's subtle enough, but yet still present enough to be like, alright, cool. So she decides to leave, Batman decides to stay, and it's kind of cool to see him kind of like shift off and kind of end the movie there. Now also we do see that the Riddler is talking with another one of the Arkham inmates, alluded to be the Joker, and he's like, hey, riddle me this, because we haven't seen the Riddler use that line, which is one of his trademark ones, bringing up the whole answer for the riddle of being a friend. It's like, oh, okay, so we see Joker and Riddler kind of palling up and everything. So these are like the beginnings of Batman's rogue gallery. Makes sense because he's only been doing this for 2 years. But we're seeing that this is kind of like a proto-Riddler to getting kind of closer to that Riddler that we know mainly from the comics. And we don't really see full what the Joker looks like or how he kind of acts here. So that kind of leaves it for another kind of day, which I'm like, okay, that's a fine kind of cameo to kind of utilize. And then there is a little thing at the end that leads to like a augmented reality game. So if you don't want to stay into the end, you don't miss anything. Alright? There's no like true end credits scene or mid credits scene. I only say that because this movie is like almost 3 hours, and that's a long time. So overall, I enjoyed this, and I thought it was a pretty kind of cool one to see Batman go after a kind of serial killer kind of thing. I wish that had been more of the focus, and that it had been a little bit tighter in that respect, because I do like these characters and how this creative kind of team has done them. I just think it kind of bloats it unnecessarily and is more kind of there to kind of provide more red herrings rather than focus on the kind of chase aspect and the detectiving aspect of Batman. However, I would say that this is one of the best DC movies in a while, and a really very good Batman movie. Granted, I'd have to really delve into my analyses of kind of other Batman movies to see which one would come out, but I would definitely put this with my love for the Nolan trilogy. Well, Nolan's third movie is like, there's definitely kind of more problems there, but I really like this take on Batman, and I never really would have thought that that would be the case. Robert Pattinson does a really good job of inhibiting the Batman, and the thing is, he's still into that kind of early stage and trying to get in, so we don't really get much of his Bruce Wayne persona that he puts out that Christian Bale was able to do in Nolan's trilogy. So that would be one of the only weaknesses that I would say, but I don't have a problem with it because it's more focused on the Batman hunting a serial killer going throughout and trying to uncover the whole corruption and everything that's going on within Gotham. So it's an understandable weakness because you're more focusing on him as Batman, so that would naturally be the consequence of being like, he's not going to be Bruce Wayne that much. Let's see. Action scenes were very well done. I really liked the cinematography. However, there was this weird fucking thing that would happen in that there would be odd parts where it wouldn't be raining and then it would be raining. Never mind that like the raining would kind of help certain shots, but it's like these people were like up here and it's not raining, and then they'd be down on the street and then it would be raining, and it would shift around, and I'm like, all right, that's kind of weird. Strange ass weather patterns. It's like, all right. Now granted, I definitely like these more than like the Zack Snyder kind of thing. I'm just not that much in beyond like 300, Dawn of the Dead, and Watchmen. I've not really been into Zack Snyder's kind of take on the DC universe. That's just me. If you like it, cool. I'm fine with that. But I really enjoyed this Batman one, and I would recommend it. Now granted, if you don't want to commit yourself to pretty much a 3-hour movie in the movie theater, I totally understand that. This would probably come to like HBO Max at a certain point, or an HBO One, but I would definitely recommend it because it's a pretty good Batman movie, and it does a nice job of like taking you through the mystery and everything without kind of just. You always have to watch out for mysteries and everything, even though I've laid out how the whole thing kind of goes down. You do have enough suspense and everything going on to kind of like get you through and be like, all right, cool. Because with capers like that, kind of like Oceans, and the mystery of what's going on and where the next kind of turn's coming, that's an important aspect. And the action scenes are really good, and the characters and character development are very good too, in my opinion. I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed learning about and seeing these characters as well. And the acting for all the other characters works out pretty well too. Robert Pattinson as Batman is pretty much my biggest kind of one that's like, yes, they did great there, and I never thought I'd fucking say that in my life. But Penguin's good, Selina's good, Jim's good. Just good Gordon. I'm like, alright, cool, we're good here. So I'll be interested to see if they make another one, or how DC's going to handle this, because I have no fucking idea how they're doing this. I don't know how this fits, or what this fits, if this is essentially like its own Nolan verse, except with this director, Matt Reeves verse, or what. Because DC, like, the thing is, the multiverse is more central to DC Comics' things, but you really kind of have to do, like, your core universe before you start doing, like, a multiverse kind of stuff. Kind of like what Marvel did. Weird, I know. And they could kind of like split off and do other kind of crazier shit. And I don't know how that's going to work out with this. So I don't know if this will get another trilogy, or if they'll be like, i.e., this director will be able to do like another movie, and then another movie. If they'll use this as some kind of basis for this Batman to be the DC's main Batman, I don't know. Because DC and Warner Brothers' decisions on how they've handled the DC universe confound me to no end. Granted, Marvels have sometimes been like, what the fuck are you doing? But this is like, what the fuck are you doing and what are you on? Oh, it's weird. So, this was a movie that understood its tone and understood its characters and was able to interweave that into a good story that it was able to tell within its runtime. And now, and as I'm able to say that, I consider that somewhat a small miracle for that to have occurred. So, more of this, please. So, those are my opinions on the movie. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also, like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.